As of late 2025, Microsoft Corporation stands as the paragon of the modern AI-first conglomerate, having successfully navigated the transition from cloud-centric infrastructure provider to the dominant architect of the generative artificial intelligence era. The fiscal year 2025 and the first quarter of fiscal year 2026 have served as a definitive stress test for CEO Satya Nadella's aggressive capital-intensive strategy. The company has effectively bet its future on the premise that AI is not merely a feature, but a foundational utility comparable to electricity or the Internet itself. This strategic posture is characterized by the democratization of AI, a vision that seeks to embed intelligence into every layer of the technology stack, from the silicon in its data centers to the operating system on a user's laptop. Financially, Microsoft remains a juggernaut. For the full fiscal year 2025, the company reported a staggering $281.7 billion in revenue, a 15% increase year over year. This growth is remarkably durable given the massive scale at which the company operates. Operating income for the same period rose 17% to $128.5 billion, demonstrating that despite heavy investment, the company maintains disciplined operational leverage. However, the transition has not been without cost. The company's aggressive capital expenditure on AI infrastructure, building data centers and deploying GPU clusters, has pressured margins in the intelligent cloud segment, which, while growing revenue by roughly 30% annually, saw gross margin percentages decrease slightly due to the costs of scaling AI infrastructure. The first quarter of fiscal year 2026 further highlighted the complexities of this new era. While revenue grew 16% to $76.44 billion, net income faced headwinds, primarily a $3.1 billion loss related to equity method investments, a direct reflection of the deeper, more complex financial entanglement with OpenAI and the costs associated with scaling their joint frontier models. Microsoft's portfolio in 2025 is a tripod of stability and growth, resting on three primary segments. Intelligent Cloud, Azure remains the company's growth engine. Azure continues to capture market share, holding approximately 20% of the global cloud infrastructure market, second only to Amazon Web Services. Crucially, Azure is growing faster than its primary competitor, driven by the AI lift, whereby every dollar of AI compute pull-through generates additional spend on storage, security, and data services. The segment's revenue reached $100.4 billion in fiscal year 2025. In productivity and business processes, the transition of the Office suite into an AI-powered platform via Copilot has successfully begun the shift from seat-based licensing to a hybrid model of seats plus consumption. Microsoft 365 commercial revenue grew 16% in Q4 fiscal year 2025, driven largely by the adoption of E5 licenses and the Copilot add-on. More personal computing, once the laggard, has been revitalized by the acquisition of Activision Blizzard and the launch of Copilot Plus PCs. Gaming revenue has surged, with Xbox content and services revenue increasing 61% in some quarters due to the inclusion of Activision titles like Call of Duty. Microsoft's market standing in late 2025 is defined by its ecosystem lock-in. Unlike its competitors who may dominate a single layer of the stack, Microsoft competes in every layer. It owns the infrastructure, Azure, the platform, OpenAI models, the application, Office Dynamics, and the interface, Windows Edge. This vertical integration creates a formidable competitive moat. An enterprise customer using Azure for cloud storage is incentivized to use Microsoft Security for protection, GitHub for development, and Microsoft 365 for productivity, as the data interoperability between these systems via the Microsoft Fabric data platform reduces friction and cost. This has allowed Microsoft to maintain a market capitalization of approximately $3.75 trillion, vying with Apple for the title of the world's most valuable company. The central takeaway from the 2025 to 2026 analysis is that Microsoft is in the midst of a high-stakes metamorphosis, It is trading short-term margin capabilities for long-term infrastructure dominance. The delay in its proprietary silicon, Maya, and Cobalt chips to 2026 remains a critical vulnerability, keeping it dependent on NVIDIA and depressing potential margin expansion. Simultaneously, the regulatory environment has turned hostile, with the FTC and EU Commission launching coordinated probes into the company's quasi-merger with OpenAI and its cloud licensing practices. Despite these headwinds, Microsoft's strategic foresight in securing the OpenAI partnership and its relentless execution in cloud computing position it as the primary beneficiary of the AI revolution. The outlook for the remainder of fiscal year 2026 suggests continued double-digit revenue growth, though investors must acclimate to a period of compressed earnings growth relative to revenue as the capital intensity of the AI build-out peaks. The history of Microsoft is a chronicle of resilience and reinvention. Few companies have successfully navigated three distinct technological paradigms: the PC era, the client-server/internet era, and now the cloud/AI era, while maintaining their status as a top-tier global enterprise. Microsoft was founded in 1975 in Albuquerque, New Mexico, by Bill Gates and Paul Allen, with a vision that sounded fantastical at the time. A computer on every desk and in every home running Microsoft software. The company's initial success with the basic programming language for the Altair 8800 was a prelude to the definitive deal of the century, the 1980 partnership with IBM. When IBM sought an operating system for its new personal computer, Microsoft acquired QDOS, Quick and Dirty Operating System, rebranded it as MS-DOS, and licensed it to IBM. Crucially, Gates insisted on a non-exclusive license, allowing Microsoft to sell MS-DOS to every other computer manufacturer who cloned the IBM PC architecture. This decision commoditized the hardware and centralized value in the software, creating the Wintel duopoly. The transition to a graphical user interface, GUI, with Windows 3.0 in 1990 and Windows 95 in 1995, cemented Microsoft's monopoly. Windows 95 was a cultural phenomenon, selling 7 million copies in 5 weeks and establishing the Start button as the gateway to digital life. By the mid-90s, Microsoft controlled over 90% of the desktop market. As the Internet emerged, Microsoft initially lagged. In 1995, Bill Gates issued his famous Internet tidal wave memo, pivoting the entire company toward the web. This led to the browser wars, where Microsoft aggressively bundled Internet Explorer with Windows to crush Netscape Navigator. This ruthless strategy drew the ire of the U.S. Department of Justice. The resulting antitrust case accused the company of abusing its monopoly power. In 2000, a federal judge ordered the breakup of Microsoft into two companies, one for the operating system and one for applications. Although this ruling was overturned on appeal in 2001, the decade-long litigation paralyzed the company's aggressive instincts. During this period, Steve Ballmer succeeded Gates as CEO in January 2000. Ballmer's tenure was a paradox. Financially, he tripled revenue and doubled profits, building the massive enterprise sales motion that sustains the company today. He also launched key franchises like Xbox, which gave Microsoft a foothold in the living room. However, the company missed the two most important consumer trends of the 21st century: search and mobile. The acquisition of Nokia's handset business in 2014 for over $7 billion was a desperate, failed attempt to buy a way back into mobile. By 2014, Microsoft was seen as a stagnating giant, profitable but irrelevant to the future. The appointment of Satya Nadella as the third CEO in February 2014 marked a radical departure. Nadella, a cloud engineer by background, shifted the mission from a PC on every desk to empowering every person to achieve more. Nadella's strategy was cloud first, mobile first. He made the unthinkable decision to bring Microsoft Office to the iPad before it was available on Windows touch devices, acknowledging that users lived in a multi-device world. He embraced open source, famously declaring, "Microsoft loves Linux," a stark contrast to Ballmer's characterization of Linux as a cancer. Under Nadella, Microsoft executed a series of strategic acquisitions that rebuilt its relevance. Minecraft, Mojang, in 2014 to secure a younger demographic. LinkedIn in 2016 to capture the professional social graph, and GitHub in 2018 to gain the trust of the developer community it had once alienated. The current era began quietly in 2019 with a $1 billion investment in a small nonprofit research lab called OpenAI. This bet, orchestrated by CTO Kevin Scott and Nadella, gave Microsoft exclusive commercial rights to the GPT models. When ChatGPT launched in late 2022, Microsoft moved with uncharacteristic speed. In early 2023, it invested an additional $10 billion in OpenAI and began integrating Copilot into every product. The subsequent years have been defined by the Activision acquisition to secure content for the cloud gaming future, the AI infrastructure build-out to support AI workloads, and the OpenAI restructuring in 2025. As of late 2025, Microsoft's story is one of a company that refused to succumb to the inertia that kills most tech giants, successfully cannibalizing its past to secure its future. The organizational health of Microsoft in 2025 is a case study in deliberate cultural engineering. The transition from a know-it-all culture to a learn-it-all culture, initiated in 2014, remains the bedrock of its operational philosophy. The official mission statement in 2025 is to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. This mission is notable for what it lacks. It does not mention software, computers, or specific technologies. It is purely focused on the outcome for the customer. This broad remit allows the company to expand into any field, from gaming to healthcare, provided it aids in achievement. The strategic vision for the latter half of the decade is explicitly defined as to democratize AI, making it accessible and beneficial for everyone. This vision is operationalized through three interconnected ambitions: reinventing productivity by shifting from static documents to dynamic, AI-assisted workflows, intelligent cloud and edge by creating a ubiquitous computing fabric, and more personal computing by making interaction with technology more natural through voice, gaze, and intention. The underlying philosophy is the growth mindset, derived from the work of psychologist Carol Dweck. In 2025, this has evolved to include a philosophy of responsible AI. The company explicitly states that just because technology can do something doesn't mean it should. This is codified in the Secure Future Initiative, SFI, which mandates that security and safety take precedence over feature speed, a direct response to regulatory pressure and cyber attacks. In late 2025, Microsoft's values are categorized into core behavioral expectations and enduring commitments. Core values include respect, integrity, and accountability. Enduring commitments include innovation, diversity and inclusion, corporate social responsibility, and trustworthy computing. Based on the senior leadership team table in the document, here is a summary of the key executives and their focus in 2025. Satya Nadella, Chairman and CEO. Serving as CEO since 2014, Nadella is the architect of the AI pivot. His current focus is on maintaining the One Microsoft culture and navigating the geopolitical complexities surrounding AI regulation. Amy Hood, EVP and CFO. The financial steward overseeing the company's massive $80 billion-plus annual capital expenditure for AI. She is known for disciplined allocation and driving the transition to consumption-based revenue models. Brad Smith, Vice Chair and President. Operating as the company's chief diplomat, Smith leads the defense against antitrust regulation and manages delicate government relations regarding AI sovereignty. Carolina Dybeck-Happe, EVP and COO. A critical recent hire from GE, she is tasked with operationalizing the hardware supply chain, chips, data centers, and improving margins in a high-inflation environment. Kathleen Hogan, EVP, Strategy and Transformation. Having shifted from Chief People Officer in 2025, she is now focused on broader strategic transformation to align the corporate structure with the new AI-first reality. Judson Althoff, EVP and CCO, leads the commercial sales organization, driving the enterprise adoption of Copilot and managing the partner ecosystem. Takeshi Numoto, EVP and CMO, responsible for global marketing, specifically regarding the Copilot brand and the commercialization of AI features across the stack. The appointment of Carolina Dybeck-Hapa as COO and the shifting of Kathleen Hogan to a strategy role indicates a company moving from wartime innovation to industrial optimization. As the AI business scales, the challenge shifts from inventing the models to building the physical infrastructure and realigning the workforce efficiently. A pestle analysis of Microsoft in late 2025 reveals a company operating at the intersection of immense technological opportunity and severe regulatory peril. The external environment is more volatile than at any point since the turn of the millennium. Microsoft faces a regulatory supercycle. In the U.S., the FTC's inquiry into the Microsoft OpenAI partnership threatens to undo or heavily penalize the company's core AI strategy. The central political argument is that Microsoft used a quasi-merger structure to avoid Hart-Scott-Rodino antitrust review. In Europe, the unbundling of Teams from Office was a direct concession to political pressure, yet probes into Azure's licensing practices continue. Governments are increasingly viewing cloud infrastructure as critical national infrastructure. The EU's push for sovereign clouds forces Microsoft to build redundant data centers within specific borders to comply with data residency laws. Similarly, U.S.-China tensions have led to export bans on high-end chips, complicating Microsoft's hardware supply chain and limiting its ability to sell advanced AI services in the Chinese market. The macroeconomic environment of 2025 is defined by the cost of capital. With interest rates remaining elevated relative to the 2010s, Microsoft's massive capital expenditures, $80 billion plus annualized, are more expensive to finance. While the company sits on a cash pile of over $73 billion, the opportunity cost of this spend is high. Investors demand clear ROI, creating pressure to monetize Copilot rapidly. As a global exporter, Microsoft is highly sensitive to the strength of the U.S. dollar. In fiscal year 2025, currency fluctuations impacted revenue by hundreds of millions of dollars. A strong dollar makes Azure and Office licenses more expensive in emerging markets, potentially dampening adoption in price-sensitive regions like India and Brazil. There is a growing social backlash regarding the potential for AI to displace knowledge workers, Microsoft's core customer base. The narrative that Copilot will replace you poses a risk to enterprise adoption if unions or worker councils resist deployment. Microsoft counters this with a skilling narrative, pledging to train 25 million people, but the social friction remains a tangible adoption barrier. The rollout of features like Windows Recall, which takes snapshots of user activity to create a searchable memory, sparked a privacy firestorm in late 2024/early 2025. This highlighted the social tension between useful AI and creepy AI. Microsoft has had to redesign these features to be opt-in, reflecting a society increasingly wary of corporate surveillance. While generative AI is the current wave, Microsoft is positioning itself for the next one, quantum computing. The unveiling of the Majorana 1 chip in February 2025 creates a massive technological advantage. Unlike the noisy qubits used by competitors, Microsoft's topological qubits promise inherent stability. If scalable, this renders current encryption standards obsolete and opens new markets in materials science. However, Microsoft is technologically vulnerable due to its reliance on NVIDIA. The delay of its internal Maya 100 AI accelerator chips to 2026 is a significant technological setback. It forces the company to continue purchasing NVIDIA's Blackwell GPUs at high margins, delaying the point at which it can lower the internal cost of AI inference. Microsoft has a stated goal of being carbon negative by 2030. However, the AI boom has caused its Scope 3 emissions to rise significantly. Training a model like GPT-5 requires energy equivalent to thousands of homes. This creates a reputational and operational risk, as the company must procure massive amounts of renewable energy to power data centers, often competing with local communities for grid capacity. Data centers also require millions of gallons of water for cooling. In drought-stricken regions, Microsoft faces environmental opposition to new data center construction. The company is investing in direct-to-chip liquid cooling technologies to reduce water dependency, but the tension between growth and sustainability is acute. Microsoft is a defendant in multiple high-profile lawsuits, alleging that the training of LLMs on copyrighted content constitutes infringement. An adverse ruling could force the company to pay billions in retroactive licensing fees or, in a worst-case scenario, delete models trained on protected data. This is the single largest black swan legal risk facing the company. The EU Digital Markets Act, DMA, has fundamentally altered how Microsoft can bundle products in Europe. The requirement to ensure interoperability and allow users to uninstall preloaded software weakens the ecosystem glue that Microsoft has relied on for decades. The designation of additional services as gatekeepers in late 2025 further restricts their ability to leverage their Windows monopoly to grow Azure or Bing. The competitive landscape for Microsoft has shifted from a static SaaS dominance to a dynamic AI arms race. The forces exerting pressure on the company are intensifying, particularly from suppliers and rivals. The battle for cloud supremacy between AWS, Microsoft Azure, and Google Cloud is a zero-sum game for enterprise workloads. While AWS maintains the lead, Azure is growing faster. The rivalry is no longer just about price or storage, it is about model as a service. Google's integration of Gemini into Workspace directly counters Microsoft's Copilot in Office, creating a feature-for-feature war. In gaming, Microsoft competes fiercely with Sony and Nintendo. Despite acquiring Activision Blizzard, Xbox hardware sales continue to trail PlayStation 5. The rivalry has shifted to subscription metrics, where Microsoft is the aggressor, using its financial weight to subsidize content costs that competitors cannot match. A new class of competitors has emerged: the AI-specialized clouds, or neoclouds like CoreWeave, Lambda, and Crusoe. These companies focus exclusively on providing GPU compute for AI training, often at lower costs. While they lack Microsoft's breadth, they are siphoning off high-value AI training workloads from cost-conscious startups. Despite this, the barrier to becoming a generalist hyperscaler is almost insurmountable. It requires capital expenditure in the range of $30 to $50 billion annually, global fiber optic networks, and massive regulatory compliance teams. This protects Microsoft from broad-spectrum disruption. Microsoft's most critical vulnerability in 2025 is its dependence on NVIDIA for GPUs. NVIDIA effectively controls the supply of the oil of the AI age, allowing them to command gross margins of over 70%, which directly eats into Microsoft's cloud margins. Microsoft's attempt to build its own chips is a direct strategy to break this power, but delays have extended NVIDIA's leverage. Additionally, while Microsoft owns a large equity stake in OpenAI, OpenAI is also a supplier of the core technology. The restructuring of their deal in 2025, which allows OpenAI to use other cloud providers if Azure cannot meet demand, increased OpenAI's bargaining power. Microsoft needs OpenAI's models more than OpenAI needs Azure's cash at this specific maturity stage. Large enterprises have low bargaining power due to high switching costs. Moving petabytes of data out of Azure or retraining a workforce is prohibitively expensive. The Microsoft tax is accepted as the cost of doing business. However, for new AI workloads, buyers have power. CIOs are increasingly adopting model-agnostic architectures, using abstraction layers that allow them to swap out models depending on price and performance. This commoditizes the underlying model, forcing Microsoft to compete on price for inference tokens. The rise of high-performance open-source models is a potent substitute for paid Azure OpenAI services. If a company can run a free, fine-tuned open-source model on its own private server for a fraction of the cost, Microsoft loses that revenue stream. The good enough open-source model is the biggest threat to the high-margin API business. Specialized AI agents also threaten to substitute general-purpose tools like Microsoft 365 Copilot. If a professional spends 90% of their time in a specialized AI tool, they may no longer need a premium Office license. The past 12 months have been defined by the industrialization of Microsoft's AI strategy. The company moved from the wow phase of generative AI to the deployment and ROI phase, dealing with the messy realities of supply chains, regulators, and balance sheets. In October 2025, Microsoft released its earnings for Q1 FY 2026. Revenue reached $76.44 billion, a 16% increase. However, net income was impacted by a $3.1 billion loss from equity investments, specifically identifying the share of OpenAI's burning losses. This was a wake-up call to investors regarding the cost of the partnership. Azure continued to defy the law of large numbers, growing 33 to 34%. Crucially, management noted that AI services contributed 9 percentage points to this growth, up from 6 points in the prior year, validating the thesis that AI is driving cloud consumption. CFO Amy Hood signaled that capital expenditures would continue to rise throughout fiscal year 2026 to meet demand, essentially telling the market that the investment cycle is far from over. The relationship with OpenAI underwent a critical evolution in October 2025. Microsoft converted its profit-sharing rights into a direct equity stake as OpenAI transitioned to a public benefit corporation. A new mechanism was introduced to define artificial general intelligence, AGI. Previously, the OpenAI board alone decided when AGI was reached. The new deal establishes an independent expert panel to verify this milestone, protecting Microsoft from an arbitrary AGI declaration that could strip it of its most valuable IP assets. Microsoft also conceded its right of first refusal on compute, likely a concession to antitrust regulators to prove the companies are distinct entities. In mid-2025, reports confirmed that the Azure Maya 100 AI accelerator chip faced performance tuning issues and yield challenges at the foundry level. Consequently, the widespread rollout was pushed to 2026. This delay forced Microsoft to increase its orders for NVIDIA's Blackwell GPUs, keeping capital expenditures high and margins under pressure. It exposed the difficulty of transitioning from a software company to a silicon designer. In stark contrast, February 2025 saw a scientific triumph when Microsoft unveiled Majorana 1, the world's first quantum processor using topological qubits. While still a prototype, this chip demonstrated error rates orders of magnitude lower than standard qubits, validating Microsoft's long game in quantum. Throughout 2025, the FTC's investigation into the AI partnerships of big tech intensified. The agency issued subpoenas regarding Microsoft's hiring of the Inflection AI team, characterizing it as a merger in all but name designed to avoid regulatory oversight. Simultaneously, the EU Commission opened a new front, investigating whether Azure's licensing terms discourage customers from using multi-cloud architectures. By late 2025, Microsoft had fully operationalized the unbundling of teams from Office 365 globally. While initially seen as a threat, early data suggests that most enterprises continued to buy the full suite due to the pricing incentives, minimizing the churn impact. Released in October 2025, the Windows 11.25 H2 update was the first to require a neural processing unit, NPU, for core features. It reintroduced the recall feature with enhanced security and introduced Copilot actions, allowing the OS to automate complex workflows across different apps. The 2025 Surface lineup marked the full transition to ARM-based architecture and Intel Core Ultra. These devices are marketed not on speed but on AI capability, specifically the ability to run small language models locally on the device to preserve privacy and battery life. The integration of Activision Blizzard reached a milestone in late 2025 with the launch of Call of Duty, Black Ops 6 directly into Game Pass. This move sparked intense industry debate regarding whether the loss of unit sales would be offset by the influx of subscribers. Early figures from Q1 FY 2026 suggest a spike in Game Pass subscriptions, but a flatlining of hardware sales, confirming Microsoft's exit from the console war and entry into the content war. Microsoft in late 2025 is a company aggressively redefining its own identity. It has successfully pivoted from being the provider of tools to the provider of intelligence. Microsoft is effectively positioning AI as a utility. By embedding Copilot into Windows Office and GitHub, it ensures that AI consumption is not a discretionary spend but a fixed operational cost for every business in the world. However, the AI gold rush is expensive. The delay in proprietary silicon means Microsoft will face margin pressure throughout 2026 as it pays the NVIDIA tax. Investors must be patient as the infrastructure scales. The greatest threat to Microsoft is no longer a competitor, but the government. The coordinated global antitrust pressure aims to dismantle the very ecosystem synergies that create Microsoft's value. The company's ability to navigate this legal minefield while maintaining its One Microsoft strategy will define the tenure of Satya Nadella's final years. Ultimately, Microsoft demonstrates the rare ability of a mature incumbent to sprint like a startup. It has bet the house on AI, and as of late 2025, the bet appears to be winning, provided it can withstand the crushing weight of its own capital costs and regulatory scrutiny.